Hey, welcome to another recording of Invincible You. We have a guest with us in the studio today. Well, not in the studio. I'm in my office and the guests in their office. We have the lovely Sarah Felton. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi, thanks for having me.
No, thank you so much for stepping forward. Just so as the listener gets an idea of who you are, tell the listener who you are and why you're here.
Okay, so I trained as a relational therapist, counsellor and psychotherapist, which isn't couples therapy. Sometimes it's difficult to explain what a relational therapist is. It basically means that I believe the relationship is key to the counselling or the therapy, and I believe that whatever happens, so you are in relationship with yourself, so what happens between yourself, others and the world around you is really important. So it's about learning how you interact with all of that stuff. It comes into the room, and then once you're aware of how you relate to yourself, others and the world around you, you can do something about it. You can change it if you want to or not.
Yeah, I guess there's an awareness there, isn't there? Because we have relationships all the time with all manner of things and beings, whether it be a dog or a human or a piece of clothing or a piece of jewelry. They're all relationships, aren't they?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we just do them without really considering what's actually happening. It's interesting when you say relational and then you give that explanation. I think a lot of people do kind of fall across into this couples relationship type thing, and I'm like, no, relationships are, oh my goodness, there's many different types of relationships, and that's why when we experience loss, then it can be the loss of a piece of jewelry or a piece of clothing.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. How long ago did you do your training? When did you qualify?
2016.
Okay, cool. And have you done anything with the qualification?
Yeah, so I've got quite an interesting journey actually. I did do a little bit of private practice, right. But I was, the short version of this story is I was traveling a long way on like 2 buses to do this thing, and one winter I was just tired, so I was like, no, I'm putting a boundary down, I'm not going to do that. And then the pandemic happened, this crazy situation that we're in at the moment.
Yeah.
And so I went off, and I work as a mental wellbeing practitioner. I'm stumbling over that because I forget what it's called. But yeah, work as a mental wellbeing practitioner, so work online at the moment, asynchronous, so it's not face to face, and it's not talking, it's typing. Absolutely love that at the moment, but hopefully I'll get back into doing stuff in the room at some point in the future.
Yeah, that sounds fascinating, and I'm guessing that takes a really particular skill set, doesn't it, to kind of be able to, I guess, type quite quickly, which is a very physical thing, but also knowing what words to use. And when you're kind of relating with people but via text, oh my goodness, that's a whole new genre, isn't it?
It is, but do you know what I find really fascinating? That when I'm in the room with somebody, I find myself thinking, right, I need to know what to say next. So just to bring it into the here and now, right now you're asking me a question and I'm thinking, right, I need to answer that, and I've got stuff in my brain, I'm intelligent, but with typing you have such a chance to just think about what it is that you want to say, and that really works for me, being able to go, I'll write this, no, that doesn't sound okay, change it, come back to something else.
Yeah, once words have left our mouth, they've left, haven't they? Yeah, definitely. We're going to look at anxiety today because it's such a massive subject. So we're going to look at that today. And as you step forward and kind of kindly offered to record this podcast with me, it was anxiety that you wanted to bring into the room. Why for you did you choose anxiety as a subject?
I'm really interested in it. It's an area of interest for me professionally, and also I've had experience of anxiety personally, and I use that in my work. lived experience is another thing that I'm really passionate about, and I talk a lot about, like the mental well-being of therapists and self-care.
Yeah.
But anxiety for me, it's just about kind of being aware of it, because we're never going to eradicate anxiety. It's a normal emotion.
Do you find that, or do you think that people ignore anxiety?
I do. I think people don't necessarily recognize it, and then it's too late. It's not too late. It's just they're in it, and it's so much. It's harder if you're aware of it. You can do something about it. I think, as I mentioned when I was talking about how I got into therapy, you become, when you're aware of what you're doing, what you're up to, how you're relating, you can do something about it. But if you're not aware about your emotions, I think people ignore what's going on in their bodies as well.
Yeah, I think you're quite right. It feels like sometimes we run from it, and it feels like what you were saying there. There's like low level anxiety, but then if there's low level anxiety, then it'll just build into something much bigger. Whereas if we can catch it when it's low level, then there's more chance that a little bit of deep breathing or some sort of body regulating exercise is going to calm that down. Whereas once we get into a higher level of anxiety, it's just harder, isn't it? It's harder to catch.
Yeah.
So, but you're quite right. I'm not sure how good we are of what's actually happening in our body, and that could be said for sadness and depression as well. Sometimes we're feeling sad, but then we so I don't know. I see sometimes with people, it feels like they run. It feels like they get this sensation in, and then they run that way, and then they run off, and it's like, I don't want to face that. I don't want to face that. So,
yeah.
Do you? How comfortable are you sharing your experience of anxiety?
Pretty comfortable. I can talk about it. Yeah. I think everybody finds their teenage years difficult. I don't want to kind of gloss over that. Growing up's difficult, particularly now with the pandemic and school and stuff. So everybody will be feeling a level of anxiety today because the kids go back to school. So that's just something to throw out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had issues getting hold of my anxiety and really dealing with that, I think. But with time, and I'm older than I was, so that sounds such an obvious thing to say. But yeah, I think I've gotten used to learning to live with it, and we can't push it away. Anxiety doesn't have to be something that overwhelms you and takes you over, but there'll always be. We were just talking before we came on about nerves and that feeling that you feel, the butterflies thing. And is it excitement or is it nerves? And some nerves are actually good. So yeah, learning to be alongside it, I think, has really been important for me.
How do you? This question's just popped into my head, but I think it's a really relevant question because what was happening in my head then, I was thinking, and we experience anxiety in different ways. We feel it in different ways. For you, it's a double-barrel question. How old were you when you first recognized it, and how were you feeling it in your body?
Probably 7, and the how was I feeling it in my body thing is difficult to answer, because I know I used to get really annoyed when people said, where are you feeling this in your body? Because I'd just go, don't know.
Yeah. And maybe that's because at 7, it's a hard thing to identify. Yeah. I'm asking the question because the other night I was getting ready to go to bed, and I kind of got a fluttering in my chest. And I was like, ooh, what's that? And I was like, oh, it's anxiety. Why? And I have no idea what was happening in my head, but I was thinking about something. It was probably because I was in the middle of a busy week, and there's lots of different elements to my week. And I was probably thinking about something. And then there was and I just felt this acute fluttering in my chest. I was like, oh, that's anxiety. Why are you anxious? But it's that, you picked up on it earlier. It's that awareness of being able to go, oh, that's anxiety. And then we go, why? And why am I feeling anxious? And then we look at the thoughts, or we look at the events of the past day, because there's nearly always a reason.
Yeah.
When when did you learn that part? When did you learn the part where, no, not that question. Another question has come to me. So at 7, you didn't know how to feel it kind of sensationally in your body. Do you now, or is that still not changed?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
As a therapist, you'll know yourself. You get exposed to all sorts of stuff when you're training, and it's quite emotional, revealing. You learn a lot about yourself, and I had personal therapy because because I needed and wanted to, but also it was part of the course. And I was often asked, where do you feel that in your body? And at first I didn't really know, but as I got used to tuning in, because that's what therapy teaches you, or some of what therapy teaches you, how to tune in. And I got used to it, and now I can pinpoint where it is.
Yeah. Perfect. I love that. I love the phrase tuning in as well. I love that phrase there, because it's almost feels like you have to learn how to tune into those frequencies, don't you? Because again, as children, we don't get that, do we? It's not something we're taught in primary school. We're gonna go physical, and we're gonna work out what we're feeling. And we don't get taught that. We get taught geography. Don't get me started on education. But we we just don't get taught that, do we? So it's something that we learn as adults. And the sensation that I got the other night of the kind of fluttering in the chest is a fairly obvious one, but there can be more subtle signs of anxiety, can't there?
Yeah.
Things like shortness of breath or sweaty palms, or I remember years ago I used to get I honestly didn't know what this was, but I used to get a really dry mouth. But the kind of dry mouth that didn't matter how much water you drank, just this dry mouth. And it wasn't until years later I was like, oh, they were, and I knew what I was going through at the time, but then I was like, oh no, that was definitely anxiety.
Yeah. There's lots of different, and I think it's different for everybody as well, or can be, the different sensations that people feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to talk about that I wanted to put that out there because it's when we talk about people tuning in, when we talk about people recognizing their own emotions, then I want people to know, it's really important people know that it comes in many, many different forms. So if you are feeling something that is unusual in your body, let's say something that feels a little bit different, then at least give it consideration. Could that be anxiety? Because we just feel it different, don't we? So in terms of your own journey, would you say now that you have learned to manage your anxiety?
Yeah, I was kind of hoping you'd ask me that, actually. Because yes, I have, but it's also important to recognize and acknowledge that we can't get rid of anxiety.
Yeah.
It's a normal, not high levels of anxiety. I'm not saying that people walk around feeling super anxious and have a really dry mouth like you were talking about all of the time, but anxiety is useful, because when we were dinosaurs or cavemen or something, we had to be aware of what was going on, because we'd get eaten, right? So it's a very primitive thing, is anxiety. And I've just lost my train of thought totally, so could you just tune me? We were talking about anxiety and how go on, Kevin. How I manage it, right? Okay, yeah, great. So it's something that I learned to live with and alongside. I don't think, for me, and this is a personal, I'm answering this for myself, but for me it's not gonna go away. I'll just draw attention to something now because it's happening and it's in the moment. So I just fluffed up my stuff. I was halfway through a sentence and I forgot what I was saying. So I'm noticing now my heart's beating a little bit faster. I'm a little bit going, I can feel it in my cheeks, just going a little bit red. And it's totally cool because I manage it. But I also find that if you acknowledge that stuff's happening for you, then it'll ease. So I'm rambling a little bit to answer the question, but basically, it's still there for me. It's not a big deal. I've got tools to manage it. So like I've just said, if I need to bring it out, I will bring it out and mention it and talk about it so that it's in the room and I can deal with it. I've got a lot of tools actually from the stuff that I've done, the training and the therapy that I've done to learn to deal with it. I love going out for a walk and getting into nature to calm myself. But no, it's learning to live alongside it for me.
Yeah. I love that you did that then. I love that you brought it into the room and you went, oh yeah. So I feel like I've just fluffed my lines a little bit and now I'm kind of going into that panic mode. You also tapped in then to where anxiety comes from. So it is primitive. We do need it because, like you say, if we didn't have any kind of anxiety or that little warning system, then the example I always use is that we would walk across the road without checking if there was any traffic. We would just walk out because there would be no like little alarm system. The difficulty, I love, you ever heard of the book called, and I mentioned this a lot of times, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers?
Do you know, it's funny. I literally heard you talk about that yesterday.
Did you?
Yes.
I must talk about it an awful lot. So it's a book. So you know the premise of the book?
No, but
Okay,
I've heard you talk about it.
So the premise of the book is that we have the same primal system that animals have because we are part animal, of course. And when we look at zebras and lions and tigers and all of the rest of it, they have the same primal system that whereas if we get triggered, so remembering that as I sit here, I've got a window at the side of me and I'll see people passing. And if there was, and my mind is, although I'm talking to you, my mind is scanning for information all the time, like thousands and thousands of pieces of data go in through my smell, through my eyes, through my hearing, all of my senses. And if anything gets triggered, even though I'm talking to you, my primal system will kick in. With zebras, because that was the subject, their primal system kicks in, and then the fear goes away, and then their primal system clicks off.
Mm-hmm.
With us as humans, we have developed this wonderful, he says tentatively, thinking system called our minds, and our minds don't allow the click off because we overthink and we worry and we go, yeah, but, what if? Whereas a zebra doesn't have that, and a zebra just their system just clicks off when the fear or the threat has gone. Their system just clicks off. And I was reading this and I was like, oh my God, that's fascinating. How interesting that actually our mind, our sophisticated thinking systems that we think are amazing are actually quite stupid at times because they don't allow us that click off and we just go into this spiral of thoughts and thinking. So it's a great little book, but that's the premise of it. You don't need to read it now. We overthink things, basically. It's fascinating. What is your number one go-to if you want to regulate your system?
Going out into nature and walking.
Oh, love that. There's some science behind that. Do you know what the science says?
Not in technical terms, but it's the walking, the putting one foot kind of by help me out a bit here, Kevin.
Oh, bilateral stimulation.
That's it. Yes.
Yeah, there is something in that. I do some, I don't know if you tried this, but I do some walking therapy with clients at the moment, just a couple that do not want to be via Skype. And actually we can meet and then we can walk just locally to where I am. And actually there's something really interesting in that bilateral stimulation. You know what I mean? It's because there is that. So there's a bilateral stimulation. For people that don't know what that is, it's the stimulation of both brain hemispheres. So whenever we do something that's alternate left and right, then we tap into that bilateral stimulation. The other part of it is, for me, is that we're animals. We're part animals. So once we're outside, we're tapping into that part of us that likes nature. And if you're in a forest, I don't know the complete science behind this, but there's something around being in a forest. Trees give off some sort of, they give something off that connects with us as humans. I think it's the Japanese that refer to it as tree bathing. and it's basically just walking through forests,
Wow.
which is.
So we're all going to run off and find a forest now.
I hope so. There is something really powerful. If I'm in a forest, and I do love being in a forest, I quite often. Where was I the other day? And I was stood and I was looking at the trees, and these trees were massive. I was just stood looking up at these trees, and if you stand and look at a tree, I'm not. I was going to say something that was really detrimental. Then I'm not going to say it. Trees are fascinating because they're so tall, the roots go so deep. They bend in the wind, or if they don't bend, they break. There's so many similarities with trees and us as humans. I just find them absolutely fascinating. And when they're really tall and strong, I'm like, wow, look at that tree. How long has that tree been stood there, just bending gently in the wind?
Oh, wow.
So,
That's so interesting, because I was just thinking the other day, bend, don't break, and that you've just said it. That's amazing.
well, trees have learned to kind of bend a little bit, and if they don't bend enough, then they're just going to break, aren't they?
Yeah.
I guess in human terms, that's flexible thinking, is what we're talking about there, is having our own ability to not be too rigid with our thinking. And if we can bend our thinking a little bit, then there's more chance that we're gonna survive. Which leads me nicely on to anxiety in the pandemic.
Now this is interesting because I want to talk about it from two different angles.
Oh, go.
So there are people out there who have never really had an experience of anxiety, who are suddenly finding themselves thrust into a world that's so well, it's getting more normal now because we've been in it for about a year, so it's but it wasn't normal, and we were ripped quite quickly from the stuff that, so people weren't able to mix with friends and family. I think that's been really hard, and the world just changed, and we were restricted. So there are people who are maybe experiencing higher than normal for them levels of anxiety for the first time and having to deal with that. But the other angle, and I must give a nod to a guy called John Ronson, who is an author, I believe. He was on Newsnight really early in the pandemic, and he said something that just stuck with me. And it is that those people who are more used to dealing with anxiety, like myself, for example, have found the opposite. So they're not quite as anxious as they normally are. And that's because we're so used to being keyed up that when something horrendous happens, we just go, oh yeah, okay, we got this. And I've definitely noticed that, from personal experience, I've noticed that. And it's interesting how there's two different, I want to say types of people, but two different experiences going on all at once.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely noticed in the beginning that there was two different types of people. And actually, for those that were experiencing higher anxiety anyway, as soon as we went into lockdown, they literally went, oh, that's cool. I can't go anywhere. I have no decisions to make. I'm fine now. I'm okay. And only once we got to, I think it was July last year, when things started to shift again, did people start to go, okay, so now I don't know what to do. And now there's more options, and I've got choices to make. As soon as the government said there was no choices, stay home, a lot of my clients, those with high anxiety, literally went, oh, I'm okay now, I'm fine. And I was like, yeah, but that's not life. Do you know what I mean? But there's just this relief almost. It felt like a relief.
Yeah. And now we're going to have to come out of it somehow.
Yeah, no, I was. One of the things I do is lockdown lives, and I'm finishing them this week with the local radio station. And one of the things I wanted to do on maybe Thursday or Friday this week, as we're recording this on a Monday, is look at ways of gently coming out of a pandemic, and gently allowing our minds to unfold. I keep using this word, unfold, back into a more normal world. And one of the things that I was looking at this morning was, one of the things I wrote down was baby steps. So just baby steps, just take it gently and let the mind gently unfold again back into what was a more normal word. Which leads me on again to something that you said earlier before we went on to record. What were you talking about? You were talking about challenge and pushing yourself and stepping forward. What's that about?
So I've got comfortable doing what I'm doing. So I can't remember whether I've mentioned this at the start of the recording or whether this was in the chat before, but basically I sort of came out of private practice because I was noticing that it was taking me like 2 buses and an hour and a half to get there, and just in winter that's quite exhausting and difficult. So I came out of private practice and started working as a mental health practitioner or a mental wellbeing practitioner, and it's from home. And then I'm so comfortable doing that that I feel like I need to push myself a bit more. So I'm slowly starting to going back to trees again, or flowers just opening up. I feel like I'm ready for some growth again. So I contacted you, and I'm doing this podcast, and I've done a few other ones. I've done some live interviews, and I'm just starting to and hopefully I don't know where that'll lead, but I'm really excited. Or am I anxious? I don't know.
Or maybe you're a combination. So why for you is it important for you to challenge yourself, to push yourself, to step into those little pops of anxiety that you might be feeling?
I think because if we don't grow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's about getting comfortable, being uncomfortable.
Yeah. We talked about this before we were recording, and I love that phrase, get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think I said to you that for me, if we feel fear, or if we, let's say uncomfortable, we could use the word vulnerable sometimes, maybe. If we're not feeling that, then, or if we are feeling that, then quite often, not always, I have to say not always, quite often it can mean growth. Do you know what I mean? It can mean that we're challenging our system a little bit again, and challenging into growth. Because I say this often to clients: if our primal system got its way, then we would be sat in the corner of a darkened room, rocking, never going anywhere, never seen anybody. Literally, that's what would happen if we gave way to it, because that's what it wants. Our primal system wants us sat in the corner of a room, not doing anything, not seeing anybody, not going anywhere, because then we're safe. And that's its job. This is really important that people hear this. The primal system's job is to keep us safe. It doesn't want us stepping out, doesn't want us to record podcasts, doesn't want our voice to be heard by hundreds of people, doesn't want that. Do you know what I mean? Doesn't want us to go live anywhere, because particularly if we go live, good grief, there is no editing on a live whatsoever. It is just whatever you say is out there. So this is part of your kind of gentle challenge and gentle pops of growth. What other things for you have you done to kind of challenge your own system?
I'm just constantly working on myself, really. So I would say that I'm starting to think about going back into private practice. It's baby steps at the moment, just slowly, gently doing it. And I also, just before the pandemic, I learned to drive, and that really pushed me out of my comfort zone. I'm just so proud of that.
Did you continue to do it? Are you still driving? Right, okay.
I'm laughing because no, but that's more because we can't get on the road, because we're not allowed to go anywhere. We are, but no, not really is the answer, and that is fear based. So you've set me a challenge, and I'm gonna go and do that.
And I asked the question because I've seen with maybe a little bit of client work and with friends, that sometimes people learn to drive and they push themselves into that area. And then I've known quite a few people that have passed the test, they've done all the things, and then stepped away from it. Literally stepped away from it. I'm like, oh my God, you've just learned to drive and you've not driven in the last year. Tell me, and this is before pandemic, this is before pandemic time, or people have used the pandemic as a reason not to drive. Do you know what I mean? It's like, well, I can't go anywhere, so therefore I'm not going to go. And I'm like, get in your car and drive, because
That's me, by the way.
well, get in your car and drive. there's places you can go. You can go within your own county. There's places you can go.
You've set me a challenge.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. We'll check it. We'll check in on that one. If you wanted to offer anybody, like, I don't know, a little piece of practical advice in terms of what they could do at home to manage their own anxiety, what would be your number one go-to place?
Breathing, and there's lots of different ways to breathe. There's 7-Eleven breathing and all sorts of different ones, but the one that I like to use because it's so simple to remember is 4-square breathing.
Yeah.
And you just breathe in for 4, then you hold it for 4, and you breathe out for 4, and then hold it, and it's so easy to remember.
Yeah.
And I think I've heard you say do some kind of deep breathing on the out, just every hour, just as a way of kind of regulating. And because we don't breathe properly, right? We don't breathe deeply enough.
We don't. One of the podcasts, there was another podcast that I recorded with a guy who delivers breathworks. So breathworks is a whole movement of different breathing techniques. And I know a little bit about deep breathing. I know the basics, but actually recording with him was fascinating. It was really interesting. And I'm doing another recording probably next week with a guy who's in the middle. He's a psychotherapist, but he's in the middle of doing his own training to be a breathworks teacher. So again, I'm really interested. I'm interested in his own journey and his own kind of revelations via his own breathwork practices, because breathworks is a whole different movement. But breathing, I talk about it constantly. People must go, oh my God, is he talking about breathing again? You're quite right. We don't breathe deep enough. We only use the kind of the top part of the diaphragm. I've learned recently that the outward breath is more important than the inward breath, and the outward breath should be longer than the inward breath. Does something to the mind. I keep saying that I'm going to look into that, and I haven't. But there's something really powerful in that part there. But it's just, my gold standard is to do 2 or 3 minutes, 3 or 4 minutes every hour of deep breathing. And people go, I haven't got time. And I'm like, come on, 3 or 4 minutes every hour? Come on. But it like really regulates your system, doesn't it? So for you, would you practice deep breathing when you feel like you need it, or is it part of your day?
I don't think I do it enough. I don't do it consciously, enough. But if I'm going to do something where I think like before my driving test, I'll do it.
It's really interesting because I was sat with a client the other day and their signal went down. And as I was sat kind of waiting for them to come back on, I went into some deep breathing. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. What did you do that for? And I was like, because I wanted to. I just wanted to take that. It was only a few seconds, but I wanted to deep breathe. So I encourage people to, I don't know, get up in the morning, sit on the edge of the bed and deep breathe. Get in the shower, deep breathe. Go downstairs, make a cup of tea, wait for the kettle to boil, deep breathe. And it's just like, I want it to be peppered into people's day as a part of what they do. Do you know what I mean? Like, arrive at a venue in your car because you know you're going to get in your car and drive. Arrive somewhere and deep breathe before you get out of the car. Get back in the car, deep breathe. It's like, it's 2 or 3 minutes. And if we kept doing that, we would have far more charge or management over our system. Far more. When you do the deep breathing, what for you does it bring into your world? How does it alter who you are?
I get in touch with my body more, so I can. One of the things I like to do is a body scan. So whilst I'm breathing, I'm kind of focusing on different areas of my body. And that that's really useful.
Yeah. And again, really, really powerful, because I also say with deep breathing that if we're deep breathing, then we're lowering the energy in our minds. And if we're lowering the energy in our minds, then it gives us the opportunity to tap into like physical sensations.
Yeah.
And for me, it brings the ability to manage what I'm saying and my behaviors and my actions, because there's a calmness there. So therefore I can edit everything that I'm saying and doing. Whereas, when there's a high energy there, we start to lose the ability to think rationally. Firstly, we lose that completely, don't we? Almost.
Yeah.
So yeah, just there's a management there. There's a management there, and people will go, "Why do I say that? Why do I do that?" And I'm like, because you've got this energy in your mind. There's an energy there that you're not managing.
Yeah. And that links actually back to where I just totally forgot my train of thought. And maybe I could have used deep breathing there. That might have worked. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe, but I think sometimes as well that we can be quite harsh on ourselves.
Yeah.
Do you ever do that?
Laughing again, because yes, of course.
Have you become less harsh on yourself?
Yes. I think part of that comes with age. So the older I get, I'm just totally looking forward to it, to be honest. They'll just be brilliant. Because you care less about what other people think.
Yeah.
And therefore you less, I think we do naturally do a lot of comparing ourselves to other people. And I think that does make you, or can make you, be harsh on yourself. But I think that's my bread and butter, and I really have to like just stop myself. And I'm getting so much better at doing that. So I'll catch myself because it happens really quickly. So catch myself doing it and go, no, you're not doing this, and turn it on its head, really.
Yeah. Why do you think we compare ourselves to others?
Wow, that's a big question. Because we don't want to look inward, maybe, and we externalize a lot. So we'll kind of go, oh, so and so's over there doing that, and that means that I need to. I think it's just, would it be too simplistic to say it's kind of human nature to do that? I don't know.
I would say it was completely human nature. For me, it comes from, again, the primal system to survive, because if we are comparing ourselves, then we are at least being somewhat aware of what other people are doing, what cars they're driving, what clothes they're wearing, whether they've got a six-pack or not, how much money they're earning, where they're going on holiday. And if we then start to try to do the same, then we are surviving and we're keeping up with the Joneses, that phrase. But for me, it comes from a very primal system. But what happens often is, because Joe Blogs is driving a much bigger car and earning more money, then we start to feel insignificant and then insecure, and then the anxiety kicks in. So comparison for me comes from a place of survival, but it's, again, a completely unhealthy and unrealistic as well, unrealistic set of expectations that we should be able to do everything that they do.
Yeah, and probably based in fear. It's really interesting that we're talking about this now, because I have been thinking about some of the stuff I see in my work as a mental wellbeing practitioner, and there's a lot of young people who, and it's not just exclusive to young people, but kind of have these, by 21 I need to, I don't know, be married, for example, and then by 25 I need to own a car, and it's so it's just, and I know that it happens, and I know that I felt some of that when I was younger, but it's really, it must just be so difficult to be in that place. We don't need to put ourselves under so much pressure.
And there's the word pressure. It's all pressure to do, or must do. And then when we put ourselves under pressure, then the anxiety kicks in, because we might not be achieving. If we look at, me and you talked briefly about academia, and we live in a world that is very much focused on academic success and degrees and doctorates and all the rest of it. And both me and you have said that we are not academic in that way, more creative. And I can say outwardly that being a creative in an academic world, which I am, is sometimes the pressure from that is horrendous. Because I see people say, well, what are your qualifications? And I'm like, well, I have qualifications, but I'm a doctor. No, I'm not a doctor. And they almost kind of go, oh, okay then. And it's like, they don't want to take me seriously because I don't have a doctor. I'm like, come on, give me a break. So it's tough, isn't it?
Yeah, very tough. And we don't need that pressure. Certainly not. Just going back to the pandemic, there's a lot of people feeling like their lives are on hold at the moment, and we don't need that extra pressure on, kind of on top of our, I need to buy a house by the time I'm 30. Well, they might be 29 and just got like 6 months left or something before they're 30. We don't need to put ourselves under that sort of pressure.
We don't. I have one last question for you. If you were to ask the listener to take away one thing from this recording, what would it be?
I'd say be you. Just be you. Because everyone else is taken and you can't be anything else, but get comfortable with being yourself, and it's such a gift. So if you take one thing away from this, it's that. I
love that, and I love that we are unique. You know what I mean? We are unique. We are pack animals. We do want to be like other people, but our uniqueness is it's special. It's just special to who we are. And you're quite right as well when you were saying that as you get older, you care less, you really do. My goodness, it's such a gift. I can say that from experience. Sarah, thank you so much I want to thank you for your honesty and your bravery and your vulnerability that you've shown during this recording, because it was just wonderful to see you kind of stepping forward and being really honest like that.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
It's been an absolute pleasure. I really hope that you've enjoyed listening to that recording there, all about anxiety. Don't forget, for me, your takeaway from this is anxiety can be managed. Please, please, please manage your own anxiety. It is not something that we allow us to take over us. So thank you so much for Home Radio, for producing these podcasts. Don't forget, you can listen to Home Radio on, let me see if I can get this right. It's a DAB digital radio station, and you can get it on, there's two apps, there's an iOS and an Android app. And you can tune in on homeradio.co.uk, or you can enable your Alexa, so you can get them all on there. I will be back next week with another recording. If we're not covering subjects that you want us to cover, then please message in. The other thing you can do is leave us a review. You can go to, I think it's Apple, they're on Apple, so you can leave us a review on there. Always nice to know what you're thinking, and always nice to know if there's subjects that you want us to cover. I'm going to go. Please be kind to yourself and be kind to everybody around you. Thanks again, Sarah.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Bye.